You want your child to be a part of the solution, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Children they're notorious about blaming themselves for everything. And one of the saddest, states of minds of a child, and it's so easy for them to get there, is what is wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I'm always the one yelling. I'm this, I'm that, right? And so we want to break that pattern, and we want to invite them in to this conversation about themselves, but we're kind of steering the boat, if that makes sense.
Will my adopted child be okay? What does their future hold? Did I do something wrong? Hi neighbor, I'm Tim, an adoptive parent and adoption life coach. If you're feeling anxious or uncertain about your parenting journey, you're in the right place. I help Christian adoptive parents with practical tools and emotional support anchored in timeless biblical principles. Anchors of hope and healing are on the way. One of the goals of this podcast is to provide resources for you on your adoption journey. On a regular basis, I share with you biblical mindset support, but I realize there are other resources that you need. Resources that I don't necessarily have the expertise to speak about. On today's show is my friend Erich Nelson. I'll share more about Erich in a moment. Erich is going to share and demonstrate a valuable script adoptive parents can use to better communicate with your children. This is an episode where you're going to want to take notes. As is the case with anyone that I bring on the show to talk to you, this information is for educational purposes only. I encourage you to do your due diligence, to listen to the information, check out the resources, and use what you can in your adoption journey to parent your child the best way you can. Hi, neighbor. I have a special guest that I am excited to bring to you today. He is my friend, Erich Nelson, my neighbor from Alabama. I want to give a little brief background as to how we connected a few years ago. Mr. Nelson, as my son Jonny knows him, was the assistant program director and training and development director at the residential treatment facility that my son Jonny was at for 6 months. And it was during that time that we became acquainted with Mr. Nelson. And it was specifically during our visits when my wife and I would visit our son. Prior to that, we would go into what was called Parent Day and do some parent training. Mr. Nelson was one of the individuals who played a key role in Jonny's successful completion and graduation from residential treatment. We were complete strangers when this process began, but we have since become friends. And even to this day, he has been a person I can talk to when I need someone to bounce ideas off of. He knows the heart of these adoptive kids, and he has a special place in our heart because of what he has done for our son. And I'm just so excited to bring him on here. And there's a topic we'll get to in a moment that he wants to address with us. But Erich, thank you so much for joining me. And as I asked our good friend Jane Baker, do you roll tide or do you war eagle?
Well, I am a roll tide, and there's really nothing else beyond that. So how about that?
I get it. I know people have their allegiances, and I have friends going both ways, but and I'm good either way.
No, it's all good. We're all friends.
Yes. The thing we wanted to discuss today, and as I mentioned briefly, is that when my wife and I would visit Jonny, before we could see him, and this I thought was a really good way to organize those visits, all of the parents who were there would participate in some special training. And it lasted, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. It was you and one of the other staff members who would share with us some different ways and share with us some different tools that we could use when we got home with our child, because up until that point, we didn't understand some of the challenges that we were facing. I mean, hence that's why our child found himself in residential treatment. We were at a point in our life where we needed some drastic help. And it was through people like you helping us understand the challenges of adoption trauma specifically. And one of the things I remember, and you want to talk about this today, our topic is de-escalation by means of empowerment. And I really want to encourage adoptive parents to listen closely to this, to take notes, because you're going to explain what this is and show us how we can use this particular tool to really help navigate some of the more stressful challenges that adoptive parenting and the relationship we have with our adopted kids. So can you explain that? And we'll just get into this discussion and do some back and forth with it.
Absolutely. And hey, thank you so much, Tim. Y'all, just the entire family, and Jonny means so much to me and many of our colleagues. So, but just I appreciate the kind words. So first things first is anything that I teach or train or talk about, it's not an attack on parenting or parenting style or anything like that. I always want to put that out there. Being a parent is hard enough. Being an adopted parent is quite the challenge, and it can be. And so when a resident came to the program, one of the biggest issues was communication or lack of communication between child and parent. There was a breakdown, gotten to the point to where, you know, well, everyone's just having a hard time communicating and connecting. And I also don't want to sit here and act like I have all of my stuff together as a parent. It's hard. It's so hard, and especially when the emotion and the love and gets in the way. I'm really, really good at working with other people's children. I hope that lands well with folks, but because there's an emotional cutoff, right? But my youngest is 8, my oldest is 21, and so I still work on this every day in terms of how to communicate and not let our own emotion, get in the way.
That makes sense, because I know you almost have to compartmentalize or set yourself apart in some way to the situation and not, well, one of the things we discovered was the things that he was experiencing with his adoption trauma and the hole in his heart, that we were told it was not to take these things personally, because it wasn't
Right.
a reflection of his love or lack of love for us or our love for him. He would treat anyone like this, regardless. So it wasn't us. This was him and his frustration with feelings that he really hadn't addressed yet. And I know he was beginning to understand those feelings that he couldn't put words to, because this went all the way back to before his birth, things that were happening
Right.
to him in the womb. And so when you say, keep the emotion out, that was hard, because we had to realize this is something that has been in his heart his whole life, and no reflection upon us as parents. But boy, it feels personal. It really feels personal. So how do we do that then?
Right. Wow, that's a great question. So the first thing we have to do as parents, and the first thing I think it's just vital, is you have to have a high level of self-awareness, right? We parent the way that we were parented. And so whatever that looks like for each of us, it's vital to kind of go back and revisit those things and revisit, how do you parent? What are some of your tendencies? Do you get elevated quickly yourself, or are there certain topics and subjects that maybe heighten your emotions? So there's a lot of self-awareness that's involved with parents, right? We're not perfect, and man, Tim, the worst thing that we could do is to think that we have to put ourselves out there as parents and that we are perfect to our children. you know,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not. And there's so much value in communicating and to our kids that, look, I'm going to mess up just like you, probably 5 times today. But you know what? We're going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure out what can I do a little bit better. So there's so
Mm-hmm.
much value in leadership from a standpoint and mentoring, even as parents, right? So we model that behavior. So I always want to put that out there first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Well, what you just said, the self-awareness of how we were parented, we realized early on that the things that worked for us weren't working for him.
Right.
And, we came from, well, both my wife and I came from very stable families. Our parents, some have passed already, but they were married 50, 60, and 60 years. So we had stability in that. And we were parented a certain way and it worked with us. But what we found out, and I can only speak from an adoptive parent perspective, but I found that having a child that's not biologically mine, that some of the tendencies I may or may not have, and some of the things that worked for me as a child and how I was parented, they just didn't translate. And so
Oh gosh.
we had to say, okay, how do we flip the script? How do we come about this in a different way? Because we thought these things would work, but then they weren't. And that's why
Right.
these parent day visits, we go, wow, we've got to really address this and come at this from a different approach.
Yeah, for sure. And and like I don't mind. I'm pretty open, pretty transparent as as a person, as a parent, as a father, friend, just things that I've learned in my journey. I was parented by, my father was killed when I was young, and so I was parented by a strong, strong single mom, and she overcorrected. My mother, everything, she was going to be bigger than you, right? She was a fighter. She was tough. She had to. She grew up on a
Mm-hmm.
farm. They had to fight and grind for everything that they had. And so here she was as a single mom and a 2-year-old child. And so that's all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of parenting, it was her way or the highway. It was, you're going to do this, or it's, I'm going to be bigger than you. That's all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up through sports, it helped with sports. I was a pretty tough guy, and but coming into parenting, I noticed early on that there I was. I'm going to be bigger than you, whether it be my child or whatnot. And that was a huge, huge, huge revelation for me, because that just cuts the communication off, automatically.
Mm-hmm.
My kids couldn't communicate with me because, my response was, no, be quiet, don't ask again. And so, with that said, it just takes a lot as a parent to be able to know what your weaknesses are, in terms of communicating or in terms of parenting with your child. And it just has to be addressed first, because you have to be able to, like you said, turn the switch off from the emotional side when interacting with a child that is escalated.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know, and I think this would apply to adoptive or biological children. Our kids know our buttons, and I know my sister who has biological children herself, she said they could always sense when mom was tired because that's when they came in for the kill. I mean, and I'm speaking, I'm exaggerating, but they knew when she was tired. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
that's with any kid. But what you're saying here, I'm thinking about my father, and I know my wife's father were both very strong individuals.
Right.
My dad could look at me, and that was all it took.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that may or may not work. And in our case, it didn't necessarily work.
Yeah,
And
for
you just
sure.
you got to figure out. Oh, so when you're having a situation that's starting to escalate, and I would go, okay, well, Dad would have done this, and it worked for me. Why is it not working for him? For Jonny?
Yes.
Okay, what do we do? What are some things that we can do? Because we're kind of flying in the dark now, and we're going, oh no. But you have some really good tips with this that you can share with us to help us understand, because I know I'm not the only one who has times, because I know I listened in Parent Day. There were other parents that had the same challenges. And there's some common things that all of us can do to help de-escalate things when they're starting to get out of control.
Absolutely. And there's actually a script. I mean, I teach a script, and the reason I teach a script is because that takes that takes you, the parent, out of the emotional reaction that you're fighting yourself, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so the first things first is, so let's picture you have a child that's angry, frustrated, escalated, the behaviors, maybe there's yelling, whatever the negative behavior is. Let's say yelling. You have a you have a script that takes you out of the emotional side of things as a parent. And the first thing that you need to do is identify a behavior of the child. So if we can picture a scenario, let's say that a child is angry and one of their normal negative behaviors is maybe yelling or throwing things across the room. You can input whatever negative behavior it is, but let's say it's throwing something across the room. So the first thing that needs to be done is to recognize the behavior. And so, if you don't mind, I'll just use Jonny
Mm-hmm. Okay.
uh, as a role play. But the first thing is, hey, Jonny, you're throwing things across the room, and I see that you're yelling and you're clenching your fists. Are you angry? And so that first sentence right there, one, we're recognizing a behavior. We're not saying, what are you doing? Or definitely not going with the what is wrong with you. But
Mm-hmm.
you're identifying. Yeah, that was a big one for me.
Oh yeah, what's wrong with you?
What right? What's wrong with you? And also, the worst question ever to ask your kid is why.
Oh yeah,
You may not want that answer, right, Tim?
right.
But yeah, I see you. You've identified the behavior, bam, and so automatically it starts shutting down the brain, the emotional side of the brain. Shutting down is probably the wrong word, but slowing down, because now a question has been asked and we're going to have to give an answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now let me ask you this, because that question is not asked with the same temperature of behavior the child is exhibiting, because you ask that in as calm a manner as you can, correct?
Oh, that's absolutely just the way I said it, and look, that's the hard part. And it takes practice.
Okay.
But it's just, even things are flying across the room or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, be safe. But hey, Jonny, wow, you're yelling and you're throwing things across the room and your face is red. Are you angry? I know that may sound silly to some folks, and you're thinking, well, yeah, my kid's gonna look at me and go, "Of course I'm angry, you idiot." But you got to trust me, because what we just did is we identified a behavior, but then we transitioned to talking about an emotion or a feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, we're looking for a response. Well, yeah, I'm angry. What do you think? And no matter what they say, it doesn't matter. Well, that's a stupid question. Of course I'm angry. Whatever is said, you respond with, I can see that you're angry. And so please don't miss the importance and the value of that second sentence there, because you are acknowledging a feeling. You're acknowledging what your child is going through. right? And now we're just bringing things down further and further and further. We're trying to get from the amygdala, right? Like I said, to that prefrontal cortex, where we're not thinking emotionally, we're thinking more logically. So those first two sentences, I see you throwing things across the room and yelling. Are you angry or are you frustrated? All I want to do is I want to get an affirmative answer from them about a feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to follow up with, I see that you're angry. And so we validated their feelings. And that is so powerful for kids. I think you'll agree.
Yes. They don't want to be dismissed. And
No,
they, well, even though you're correcting in a way that I guess is inviting participation on their part for the correction. Does that make sense?
that absolutely makes sense. That's the whole point. You want your child to be a part of the solution, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Children they're notorious about blaming themselves for everything. And one of the saddest, states of minds of a child, and it's so easy for them to get there, is what is wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I'm always the one yelling. I'm this, I'm that, right? And so we want to break that pattern, and we want to invite them in to this conversation about themselves, but we're kind of steering the boat, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so we're teaching them tools, right?
Right.
As you go, we're teaching them tools. And so the second sentence there, I can see you're angry and really mean it. Look at them in their eyes. I don't know if you need to play a character in your mind seriously at first, but think about times that, look at your child. Think about times that you were so angry or frustrated, you could just cry, or you could just, grit your teeth so hard that you thought you were going to chip a tooth. So have that
Mm-hmm.
empathy, because that will come out in your words and that will come out in your face. Obviously, as parents, that's where we are anyway. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you want what's best for your child. It's just in the heat of the moment, you've got to, I'll use a word that maybe sounds weird, but you almost have to divorce yourself from the situation and come at this impartially. And that's not easy to do.
Absolutely.
It's not easy.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I'm not, look, like I said, I'm really, really good at working with your child. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm just like everyone else. I'm just like everyone else when working, with my own child. So
Right.
I get it. I get it. So the next, so we have validated, I see that you're angry. And so now we're just going to ask a simple question. What are you angry about? And so now, again, your child is having to think. Now, look, I get it. Y'all, this may be, there may be already a 20-minute knockdown drag out, right? And you know what they're angry about. During this little script, during this little, time, act a little dumb. But what are you angry about? And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to give them time to answer that question. And so, if, let's say that Johnny is angry. I can see you're angry. Okay, what are you angry about?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm angry about. You wouldn't let me go over to my friend's house. And so then I'm just going to come back with, again, I'm going to validate that feeling. So what I'm hearing you say, Johnny, is you're mad because you aren't getting a chance to go over to your friend's house and hang out. So now we've isolated what's caused the feeling and the emotion. And so we're going to get obviously a yes or an affirmation of and go from there. So just those first four sentences. And I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I want to just kind of go back. So the first one, hey, Johnny, I see that you're throwing things across the room. You're yelling. What's going on? Are you angry? Well, yeah, I'm angry. I can see that you're angry. What are you angry about? Well, I'm mad because you won't let me go over to Tim's house. And you said I could go to Tim's house, and now you won't let me go. Whatever, naturally your child is going to may start trying to keep escalating a little bit. Just listen, just let them talk. And so whatever that finishes, I wanted to go to Tim's house, you won't let me go to Tim's house. And then the next question is what do you want? Now that may sound silly, because Jonny just said, I want to go to Tim's house. But this is so important. It's what do you want? And they, well, I want to go to Tim's house. You know, I just said that. But we're kind of bringing them back into where we're having this logical conversation, because here is where it gets super, super, super powerful, in my opinion. So what do you want? Well, I want to go to Tim's house. I just said that. And so then the next question is what have you tried? Right. So now we have now you've brought your child to the front of the brain. And now we're thinking, we're not being emotional. We're thinking this through. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
what have you tried? You want to go to Tim's house. What do you want? I want to go to Tim's house. What have you tried? And then let them answer. This is like, y'all, being a parent a lot of times is like being a salesperson. First one that talks loses. And so if you're a talker like me, that's tough. But it's what have you tried? Well, I don't know. All right, let's think this through. You want to go to Tim's? I hear you. In order to go to Tim's, what have you tried? Well, I just haven't tried anything. Okay, what else? Well, I got mad and I was yelling. Okay, yeah. And then, so whatever, just go down the list. And then the good old Dr. Phil question is, how did that work for you? But it's so important, right? So what have you
Mm-hmm.
tried? I don't know. I didn't try anything. Or I don't know. I got mad and I was yelling. And well, how'd that work? And then you got to, the important part as a parent here, you just got to stay even keeled and calm and let them know that, look, we're trying to figure this out together, right? It's not that relationship, that parent-child relationship of maybe just straight authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or discipline or disappointment. We're trying to figure this out together because, man, I want you to go to Tim's. I really want you to go to Tim's. But boy, we got to figure this thing out. In order for you to get what you want, we gotta do, we gotta do what you have to do, right? So I'll back up a little bit there. What have you tried? I've done this, I've done that. How'd that work? We're looking for an answer of obviously it didn't work. And you may have to just kind of keep going with it. But how'd that work? Well,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work. I'm still at the house, aren't I? Or I'm still stuck here, or, whatever that answer is. So then at that point, we've got them to confirm to us that what they've done so far is not working. They're also then obviously telling themselves, man, whether they know it or not, their brain's like, look, what I'm doing right now is not getting me what I want. So the next question after how did that work for you? And you get that answer is, what are you willing to do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you willing to do? You want to go to Tim's. What are you willing to do to make that happen? And then let them, there's no bad options. There's bad options, but don't recognize them all. So even if, let's say Jonny goes, well, I just walk out that door and start walking. Don't get escalated yourself. Just, that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I like that option, but it's an option. What else are you willing to do? And then let's keep kind of steering it. I don't know. I guess I could, you wanted me to do some chores before I left. I guess I could do the chores. That's an option. That sounds like a good option. What else? Even if, you come to the one like that's a good one, right? Even if you come, still go ahead, maybe ask one more question. Any other options? Well, I don't know. I guess I could just ask nicely, ask a little more nice or calm down or whatever that is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now we have three options out. I could walk out the door, take off walking. I could complete the chore that you told me I needed to do before I could go anywhere. I could be more polite. Now we're working through this together. We're now a team, meaning you're now a team with your child, right? And we're figuring this out. So how powerful is that instead of force against force or friend against foe? We get caught up in that as parents, or they get emotional, we get emotional, they get more emotional, we get more emotional. But following this, and look, y'all, this takes so much practice, and it takes doing it over and over and over again. But now we are finding a solution with our child that they can get what they want. We're now so far past that negative behavior. Okay. We're now focused on a solution. And so going back, we had three options. Hey, Jonny, of those three options, which one sounds the best to you? Well, I guess I could clean up my room like you asked me to. And, then maybe I can go and then reaffirm. Man, I like that option.
Mm-hmm.
And, get your own personality in there. I mean, Tim, you know me, I'm a cut up. I use a lot of humor to break down barriers but these are your kids. And so, your kids better than anyone else. And, you know, put yourself into this, like me, for instance, I'd say, well, I guess I could clean my room like you asked me to. And, you know, this is me. I'm not, but this is me. But hey, I like that option a lot. Yeah. That walking out the door and walking, that's 7 miles. I don't think that was a good one. And again, this is just personality, but I don't know if you could have made 7 miles. Now,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we got to be careful when we're dealing with reactive attachment. The kids it may sink in their head. I'll show them.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah. Uh-huh.
that's a side note. But anyway, just put your personality into it to where it's even more of an emotional bonding, if you will, with your child. Does that
Mm-hmm.
all make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I had a couple of questions. I've been writing these things down.
Yeah,
And
please.
when you were telling them to come up with options, because I know in times past when I was parenting situations like this, I would provide 3, 4 options and say, okay, pick one.
Right.
But you're saying it's probably better to have them come up with the options, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Because
Okay.
that they're taking ownership of the solution, right? It's no longer, well, dad just wants me to do A, B, C, and D. Right. I
Mm-hmm.
want them. There's so much more ownership and commitment, and we're building self-esteem
Mm-hmm.
bit by bit by bit because they're coming up with the solutions, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
showing the internal power to overcome a fight, flight, freeze, and emotional state of mind to a calm, solution based mindset, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. That's so powerful for these kids.
Right. Well, I guess the other thing I'm thinking is that, well, there's a lot of things going through my head, but I remember, and you probably were told this too, do this because I said so, and that's just like, oh, I mean, there are times I believe that's appropriate. There are times, but more times than not in scripture, when we think about the perfect father, he'll tell us to do things, but he usually gives us a reason.
Right.
And I'm thinking with this that is as they start to provide options for you to consider, the parent still has to have veto power.
Yes.
And that how do you get that point across? Because when they think, okay, I'm giving you these options, what if they don't give you an option that's really viable? Do you say keep going? Is that how you do it, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So go through the options. Okay, that's an option. Or, I'm just throwing out some things I've heard over the years. And, um, you know, well, I guess I could just go beat him up. Okay, that's an option. Or, um, well, I guess I could just go flatten his tires. That's an option. I'm not a big fan of that one, but it's definitely an option. And so we
Mm-hmm.
come up to where we don't have these good options. You do need to kind of step in and say, look, I hear you. I can tell that you're angry. And a lot of times when we're angry, golly, we just want to react and we want to make things right and we want to get back at people or whatever it is. But what I'm interested in is you and I coming together and let's see if we can come up with some options that are one, um, going to keep you safe or not unsafe. Two, nothing about breaking the law. We're working on finding new solutions, finding better solutions when normally we would want to come up with, um, you know, poor solutions, poor
Mm-hmm.
decisions, poor
Okay.
behaviors. So you do need to steer a little bit there, but it's a delicate because you still want to give them power and make them feel empowered, but you're just kind of there as a safety net. That's a great, great question.
Got it. Got it. This reminds me because I talk about biblical mindset support for adoptive parents. As I was thinking of how you were going through all these different questions and so forth, it all begins with the soft answer turns away wrath. And so if you start with that, now you put some meat on the bones of that particular statement and have given us some really good questions and strategies, a script to follow that you can start to implement and see how to de-escalate these situations. So this is really helpful. I mean, I took notes. I hope that other parents listening to this are taking notes too, and practice this. Maybe it's something you practice with your spouse or you practice with another person just to kind of get your chops for this, because in the heat of the moment, this almost needs to be something that you can just, well, it's going to take practice. You need to have some idea where you're going with it. So you've seen this work with the residents and the residential treatment. So I just really appreciate you sharing this information with us, because one of the reasons, and Jonny will admit to it, he talked about in our journaling episode, that we have holes in the walls that things got out of hand and he just punched a hole. And but you don't want that. You don't want that kind of stuff. And so how can you de-escalate those situations? So I really appreciate you taking your time to share these with us. Now, as we wrap up, there's something I haven't shared yet with the audience, but I know that you have a personal mantra that you were talking to me about a few years ago, and that has evolved into something pretty cool. So can you, as we wrap up, can you tell people how they can connect with you and share a little bit about that mantra that you live by? It's really, really cool.
Yeah, so absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So several years back, the phrase "do life big" kind of popped into my head. I actually think it came from a Amy Grace song that my kid was listening to. But a couple of years ago, really going through some extensive health medical issues, and we just kind of started a movement. And I just really felt like God was putting in my heart that, we weren't designed. He didn't design us to live small. When we're out talking about the kingdom and the glory of God, I mean, he's not looking for people that are, kind of sheepish and stuck in a box and stuck in their comfort zone. We were designed to be bold and to be bold, and to do life big. And so that's turned into the Do Life Big project, which the Do Life Big project is geared towards teens. My wife and I coach some sports. It's geared toward teens and anyone else, but it's just designed to motivate, inspire, and empower people to go after their dreams and their hopes, to do life big, to stop living small and let fear get in the way and get stuck in your comfort zone, but to do uncomfortable things to get new things in life. And we all have different bigs, right? My big may be to travel the world. Okay. I actually had some friends, it was a couple, but their big at the time was to be more intentional with their time together as a husband and wife, right? So when they're at dinner, they're having conversation, they're reconnecting. And so it's like goals, it's a bucket list, it's anything you want it to be, but it's just challenging folks to challenge your thought process and to not get stuck in life.
That's really cool. And I'll put a link to, I'll add any links that you have for this in the show notes. But I don't know if you realize this, but when that phrase first came out a few years ago, I took a challenge that you initiated and I went live on Facebook. And, it's not something that was way out of my comfort zone. Well, that was probably, looking back now, that was probably the seeds of this podcast,
Wow.
because I
Wow.
never intended to be a podcaster.
Mm.
And, you inspired that phrase inspired me to get out of my way, get out of my comfort zone, and actually try something. And I did that video, and then I ended up doing some more live videos and thinking maybe I could do this. And I'm still trying to say, well, maybe I can do this. But I'm glad to connect with you here and connect with that message and encourage other people to embrace that message too, and try things, and because you never know where it will lead. But I do believe God wants us to do things big. So again, thank you so much for being on here and sharing your expertise with these adopted parents, because I think these tools can really help us to parent in these children that we're so in love with, but we at times don't know what to do for them. So having tools like this can really help. So again, thank you so much, Erich, for being with us today.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for sharing that. That means the world to me in terms of your journey. So I just appreciate you as a friend, and I wish you all the best with your podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate neighbors like Erich. They are true anchors of encouragement for adoptive parents like myself. This script that he shared with us today is a perfect example of a tool that we can use now to de-escalate situations in our families by actually empowering our children. I would like to encourage you to listen to this episode again, to practice some of the role playing that Erich suggested. The goal, as he stated, is to build a team with your child, a team that can come to some kind of peaceful resolution to conflict. I believe if we do that, it will not only result in peaceful families, but it will also strengthen our relationships. That's all for this episode. I want to thank you for joining me. If you know of other adoptive parents, please share the show with them. It's my hope that this information can reach as many people as possible. Until next time, this is Tim, encouraging you to do what you can now. I hope today's episode encouraged you to face the storms in your parenting journey with courage and confidence. If so, would you please share this episode with another adoptive parent? It would also bless me in the mission of this podcast if you would take a couple of minutes and leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, this is Tim, encouraging you to do what you can now.